is 5:30 kickoff on Saturday. It's West Ham against Arsenal. West Ham obviously beat Newcastle at St James's Park last game out. I thought that was quite a shock result. I don't think anyone was expecting that, but Newcastle were extremely timid in their approach, which is unexpected. But to win by 2 clear goals at a stadium like St James's Park is a real achievement, a real accomplishment, and I think they'll gain a lot of confidence from that. That was something that they really needed. That was their 4th victory of the season, and that lifts the Hammers to 14th, so they'll be looking to sort of use that to build some momentum going forward. For Arsenal, the international break came at an ideal time for them, and they've looked sort of rejuvenated since then. They put together 3-0 win against Forest, comfortable win against Forest, and then a 5-1 victory against Sporting. Now bear in mind, this Sporting side did just beat City at home, so to beat them 5-1 is, again, very, very good result for them. That sort of broke them out of a 3-game winless rut just before the break. And they now find themselves in 4th, tied on points with Chelsea and Brighton. So they're 8 points off Liverpool. They've got work to do, but given that they look a more rejuvenated side, I think that's the right word to describe them so far. They'll be confident coming into this game. The injury report is an interesting one. We had Gabriel taken off late against Sporting with an injury, so he's doubtful for this clash. It will be Kyrgios to deputise for him. He joins a very short injury list of just Ben White and Tomiyasu, so I imagine we get quite a similar Arsenal side to that which beat Sporting. It's an equally small injury list for the Hammers, and actually quite a similar situation for them, as they had Todibo taken off with an apparent injury, a hamstring injury, I believe, at St James's Park. He was replaced by Mavropanos, who will likely retain his spot at the back. But otherwise, it's we expect a sort of unchanged lineup for West Ham, as Kudus remains suspended. First angle for me for this game would be for Paqueta to make 2 or more tackles. He made 7 tackles against Newcastle, and I think watching that game, he was the standout performer from a sort of defensive perspective, that he put himself about, he was involved in everything went through him, and I was really, really impressed with how he played. This game in general, West Ham against Arsenal, isn't really a fantastic matchup to target in my opinion. I think West Ham have been quite inconsistent this season, quite difficult to bet on. But really like Paqueta, as I said. So in that game, there was no Guido Rodriguez and no Edson Alvarez. So Souček and Paqueta played in sort of a double pivot. And as I said, Paqueta was absolutely excellent. 7 tackles, and he often found himself sort of drawn towards the right wing to help deal with Anthony Gordon. So if we are to see him do something similar, that would see him get in duels with Bukayo Saka, who obviously sees a lot of the ball for Arsenal, linking up with Odegaard on that side. So I think if Paqueta is getting in duels with the likes of Odegaard and Saka, this line on the surface, 2 or more tackles against an Arsenal side who will dominate the ball, dominate possession, looks a bit low. Obviously, that's before looking into any data. So Paqueta hasn't exactly been a fantastic target for tackles this season. He's averaging just 2.19 tackles per 90 in the league. If we exclude the Carabao Cup, 2.19 tackles in the league. And that actually drops significantly when playing at home. So you can see him averaging just 0.79 tackles per game at home. But this bet has landed in 2 out of 6, one of them being against Man City, who are arguably the most similar side to Arsenal in the league. But again, the focus for me is on the fact that he'll be playing in a sort of deeper role, finding duels with Saka and Odegaard, operating in that sort of zone of the field. And just generally, I think 2 tackles at 1.8 looks a bit high on the surface. So that's something to take advantage of, I would say. As I say, if we look into his last 3 games, he's made 7 tackles against Newcastle away, 4 tackles against Forest, blanked against Everton, but that's not as good a matchup or anywhere near as good a matchup as Arsenal. So if he can sort of avoid picking up a card, if West Ham decide to sit in, which I imagine they will, Really like his tackle prospects, and I do see the potential to ladder. He's much shorter elsewhere on Sky as well, so I do like this price from 365. Second angle for me would be targeting a particular matchup, and it would be Bowen against Calafiori. So as I say, West Ham have been a bit inconsistent with betting this season, and they have not been a target whatsoever for sort of drawing fouls. Bowen actually ranks second, if we exclude Guilherme. Bowen ranks second for the Hammers squad in terms of fouls drawn. He's only averaging 0.92 fouls drawn per 90, so not ideal stats based on that. However, if we look into the games that he's played without Kudus, we'll have to include the Carabao Cup. He drew 4 fouls against Bournemouth. Kudus didn't start. He drew 1 foul against Liverpool, 1 foul against United, 0 fouls against Forest, but 2 fouls against Everton, 2 fouls against Newcastle. From watching him in that game against Newcastle, he was a real outlet for his side alongside Mikel Antonio. And he just generally sees a lot more of the ball without Kudus. He sees a lot more responsibility for sort of dragging his side up the field. And he's a proficient dribbler, and that makes him a target for drawing fouls. Obviously, his data isn't great this season in general, but without Kudus in a good matchup against Calafiori, I like his chances. So you can actually get Calafiori foul and Bowen to be fouled, which comes out at 1.75 with Paddy Power. Obviously a little bit on the shorter side, but I do think it's a matchup to target, and this same bet is 1.57 with Sky to sort of highlight the value there. In terms of Calafiori's data, the Italian is averaging 1.67 fouls per 90 as an Arsenal player, landing a foul in 7 out of 9 games. So he's obviously quite an aggressive player, still adjusting to the Premier League. So I really like that matchup. I think those two should be directly involved with each other. Again, seeing as Bowen is such a big outlet for his side, should bring Calafiori into quite heavy involvement in this game. Again, I'm going to stick with a few more leans in this one. I like those two as solid angles, but I am going to go through a couple more leans. First one being Bowen to make a tackle, and that's purely off the hit rate. It's priced at 1.3 with Bet365, but it's landed in 13 out of 15 games. So I think that's a nice price. Took advantage of that last weekend, and we get a similar price with 365. So like that. And second of all, Saliba tackles, which has been a play all season. The reason it's just a lean for now is because Gabriel was doubtful. Now, if Gabriel misses, we'll see Kirill line up alongside Saliba, and we might see the Frenchman play in the sort of more defensive role, Kirill being the aggressor, which would obviously not be ideal. So I think it's important to wait for team news there. However, I do really like his matchup against West Ham, and Antonio in particular, who's sort of has the tendency to just kind of dribble into his opposition centre-back. He doesn't really... he just has a tendency to pick up the ball and just run forward kind of thing. So I do like backing sort of opposition centre-back tackles against him. But as I say, if Kirill is to be the man to engage with Antonio, more often than not, I'd probably lean towards avoiding him for now. Now, we had this situation earlier in the season. I believe it was against Atalanta, where Gabriel was doubtful, but he did end up playing. So I think if there's a chance Gabriel can play, he will play, and then this looks a good bet. Now, Bet365 are at 1.66 for that for 2 or more tackles, but it's normally Ladbrokes who open up much bigger than everyone else. So if we can get a price around evens, that would be ideal. So that would be all the Saturday games. Moving